interesting week, as every week seems to be. More things for me to learn, more things for me to inspect, more things to question, so that I can come into a greater truth. And so today I'd like to talk a little bit about work and vocation, since it's been on my mind pretty frequently over the last few days. I recently had my boss fly in to Los Angeles to join me for about a week, as well as some colleagues. So this idea of work and what I do and how I do it has been on my mind all week. Is work and vocation. Work and vocation. And I say work and vocation because we use this word vocation pretty loosely. We use it in substitute for work. So a lot of times people say, I want to figure out what my vocation is, and what is it that as a vocation, I'm choosing this career and that career. And so I wanted to stop and take a look at this word vocation, because if we really look at this word, what we would find is that the word vocation is actually a word that originated in the late to middle English 1400s, 1450. And the Latin root of the word vocation is vocare, which means to call. So what is being called, or what's calling, if you will? Well, the word or the term is referencing a call from spirit. In fact, before the 1500s, vocation was exclusively used for people who went to follow a spiritual calling. So a vocation is actually a spiritual calling. It's following guidance, inner guidance. And it wasn't until the 1500s that the word was then associated with occupation or professions. And then, of course, we have the word work, which work is defined as exerting effort, labor being expended, as work is a means of one's livelihood. So when we really look at the true meaning of vocation versus the meaning of work, what we will find is that work and vocation are completely two different things. And what came to me is vocation is of spirit, so vocation is of truth, and work is of ego. This idea that we have to work for a means, or work becomes a means as one's livelihood. So we need, work, and work is always hard. So vocation is guided by spirit. And so I started to think about that and contemplate that, and start to think a little bit more about the teachings in A Course in Miracles and how work sometimes presents problems. And what I'm finding, and what I've come to, is that at the end of the day, if we really, really understand what vocation means, and if we're really in alignment with our vocation, what we will find is there is no work. Because if we're following spirit and we're being guided, that is not work, that is inspiration. So there's a clear distinction between vocation and work, and all the problems that come up from work have nothing to do with the form and everything to do with whether or not we're listening to spirit or ego. And so, anyways, last week I was thinking about this as my boss was visiting. And by the way, it was a great visit. It was wonderful to have her out here. And it was wonderful to show her what I'm working on and what the stores are working on. If you don't know, I also have a job where I manage customer service in department stores here out in the West Coast. So I got to travel this past week with my boss in all these stores. But what was interesting is, as this meeting was coming up, as this visit from my boss was coming up, and as my colleagues who came with her were arriving, in my mind, I was getting caught up in this, oh my God, I got to get ready for her visit. I got to get ready for the visit. Now, in the moment that I'm having these thoughts that I got to get ready for the visit, which means I got to work for something, I need work, or I need to create something so that when she comes, she has a good time, because of course now I'm responsible for her visit, because I'm going to be judged. All of a sudden, all these thoughts of ego are coming up for me in preparation for my boss. I had totally disconnected from my vocation. I've totally disconnected from my real work, which I will go into in just a moment. But so it created this sort of suffering for me in waiting and getting ready for. When in truth, when we're following our vocation, there's nothing to do. In fact, this idea of work falls in the face of what the Course would teach us, which is, I need do nothing. So anyways, I'm dealing with these thoughts of getting ready. The good news is I saw these thoughts as they were coming up, and I was willing to let them go and see something quite different. And what happened is I decided to drop everything in a moment and say to myself, I am going to follow Spirit. I'm going to do what inspires me. And quite honestly, I was not inspired in this idea that I had to get ready for my boss. I was completely inspired by saying, let's see what happens when she gets here. And that's what I did. And so she got here with her colleagues, and it was the best time I've ever had with my boss. Now, in truth, some could say I didn't do anything, meaning there were really no agendas that I planned. There was, typically some people in preparation for a boss may line up all the things that they've done over the last 6 months, or may line up all the accomplishments and all the challenges. Didn't do that. Pass. She just showed up, and we were going to talk with whatever showed up in that moment. And we did, and it was fine. It was perfect. And we laughed. We joined, and if there were accomplishments that needed to be talked about, they came up in the moment. If there were challenges that needed to be talked about, we talked about that too. Now, I had colleagues here as well. So some of my colleagues came to visit from New York, and there were some meaningless thoughts and suffering that went along with that as well. I started to think about, well, what are they going to think about me? What are my colleagues going to think about me? Now, we were also having meetings. So in these meetings, I had these crazy thoughts about, am I being judged for the things that I'm saying in the meeting? Or I need to say the right thing in this meeting. Or I need to make a point to say something smart. And so, again, those meaningless thoughts were taking me away from my vocation, which was to be aligned with the call of Spirit. But instead, I was following ego, because ego would say, to prove that you are working in alignment with the company, to prove that you add value, to prove that your work counts, you need to say something smart at a meeting. You need to stand out in a group. And of course, you need to compare yourself to your colleagues. And you need to judge your colleagues. And so those thoughts are coming up for me. But again, they were beautiful because what they did is they gave me an opportunity to unlearn the habits that I have learned over the years in this system and in this belief of working, this quote-unquote work. And so the week ended, and it was a beautiful week. I loved the time I spent with my colleagues. We had dinners, we laughed a lot, and had a good time. But it made me think about, not only in my life, but in other people's life. I know that sometimes I talk to people, friends, and when we talk about work, oftentimes we get into these heavy stories about work, and we talk about issues about work and problems. And so work becomes, the belief in work becomes this reason to not be happy, or this reason to suffer. And I have to admit that has been a part of my life for many years. Not so much in recent times, but certainly it was very deep for me when I was younger, ever since I can remember my first job. I remember hating my first job. And so we sometimes don't like what we do, and that's what happened to me. When I got my first job, I had the responsibility of separating beer and soda bottles. I worked for a beverage distribution company that took back or recycled bottles, and my job was to separate beer bottles from soda bottles. Not very fun. It was my first job, and I hated it. I hated it because they were gross. These bottles were either sticky, dripping, beer. Now you can imagine what stale beer mixed with sugary soda. It was like this combination of like Orangina, nasty kind of corner alley stench, multiply it by 10 or 20, and that was the environment I worked in. And I separated these bottles all day long, and I hated it. And every grueling second of it was horrible. But why did I do it? Well, I did it because this indoctrinated belief, I was excited about, first of all, making money as a kid, as many people are, certainly getting excited about making money. But the whole point, or what I was indoctrinated or chose to believe at that time, is that the money was going to provide me with the means to get something that would make me happy. So I had learned at a very early age that if I worked, despite the conditions, despite what I was doing, if I can get the means, if I can get the money, I could be happy. So it was a very early lesson that money was a means to my happiness. Now, I didn't know this at the time, but now in this moment, certainly I'm coming into a much bigger, more evolved way of looking at it. But at that time, that's what I learned. And yes, I got my first car in high school. And I was working for that because then I would be happy. That was my learnings of that time. And it was my first job. Now, it falls again in the face of what ACIM, or A Course in Miracles, would teach us, which says, I need do nothing. In fact, I'm going to read paragraph 1 from page 388 in chapter 18, section 7, I need do nothing. The first paragraph says, you still have too much faith in the body as a source of strength. What plans do you make that do not involve its comfort or protection or enjoyment in some way? There you have it. It was a complete belief that I am a body, and so it was this desire to want to have more. It was this desire or need to have more, to be fulfilled. But the Course says this makes the body an end, not a means to in your interpretation. And this always means you still find sin attractive, which is basically saying that really, I was missing the point. What I really wanted was the happiness. But what I was doing was making the body the ends. I thought it was about taking care of my bodily needs, my needs for a car, my needs for clothes to make it look nice, my needs for popularity, my needs to buy things. So my first job was not about a vocation. My first job was about work, was about ego, was about things, was about sin, was about this belief in separation. And I think lesson 337 in A Course in Miracles, my sinlessness protects me from all harm, poignantly makes the point that there's no body to protect. There's nothing to do. It says, my sinlessness ensures me perfect peace, eternal safety, everlasting love, freedom forever from all thought of loss, complete deliverance from suffering. Isn't that what we all want? That is exactly what I wanted when I was in my teenage years. The lesson says, and only happiness can be my state, for only happiness is given me. So I must have been choosing, or I must have chosen to believe I'm separate. So every time I'm in a situation where I don't like what I'm doing, I am choosing to be separate. When I'm suffering, I'm choosing to be separate. So in preparation for my boss last week, every time I thought, I have to do something to get credit for or to be happy, or I needed to do something in preparation, every time I thought to myself I was going to judge my comments in a meeting, every time I was comparing myself to others, I had forgotten that only happiness can be my state, for only happiness is given me. What must I do to know all this is mine? I must accept atonement for myself and nothing more. So there's nothing in the meeting that I could have said. There's no amount of planning that I could have done for my boss. No amount of planning that would have ultimately satisfied me and made me happy. Yes, I could have done a really good job of recapping what I've done in my region and telling her all the great things that have happened. I could have done a really good job of coming up with really wise things to say at the meeting and be very calculated about what I said. And I can also look at my colleagues and plan. And I may have done a good job in the world's eye, the reference point being ego, the reference point being this is work. But that would never really give me the true happiness that I'm looking for each and every moment. That would never bring me closer to the truth of what I am. That would never bring me closer to the understanding or the experiential knowledge that this is all illusory. Because the next time my boss would come visit, I'd probably have to do myself up. I'd probably get myself in a one-upsmanship game of having to do a better time the next time. And so that's a never-ending cycle that I choose not to be a part of. It's so much easier to allow Spirit to guide me. I must accept atonement for myself and nothing more. God has already done all things that need be done. And I must learn I need do nothing of myself, for I need but accept myself with a capital S. My sinlessness, created for me, now already mine, to feel God's love protecting me from harm, to understand my Father's love, His Son, to know I am Son my Father loves. I am the Son my Father loves. So when we find ourselves in a position of not liking what we do at work, it is a clear recognition that we are not following Spirit. We are not aligned with our calling. We're not aligned with our vocation. We're getting caught up in the ego thought streams of what work is and what it needs to be. And I could be picking up cans on the street. It wouldn't matter, because the end is happiness, joy, and peace. Further in my career, I would also hit points where I did not like the people that I worked with. Now, that wasn't everybody, but there were times in my career, in different places that I worked, that I would always find one or two people who I just thought were either out to get me or had a particular agenda to make life difficult for me. And this is something I hear sometimes in conversation, where people will talk about their work environment, and it's very easy to talk about what other people are either not doing or other people making it more difficult. And, for me, I always, when I was in my first couple of jobs, I always wanted to, be promoted. Be promoted, because that was where my happiness was. In many work environments, we are taught that success is moving up a ladder. Success is going up in ranks. And in every work environment, I worked about 4 different companies in a span of about 10, 15 years. And in every single work environment, I would do really well from the perspective that everybody seemed to like me, and I had a lot of relative success to the business that I ran and the people that I managed. People genuinely liked to work with me and for me and alongside me, and I would always in my mind know that I'm going to get promoted, and it would happen. I look back, there were many times I got promoted and I would feel happy. I would feel a sense of accomplishment. But if anybody out there, which I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who've had this experience, it doesn't last very long. The honeymoon's about 3 months before you realize, oh, shoot, I have additional responsibilities or more accountability. And the paycheck that got a little bit bigger really didn't make a difference either. So, here I am chasing all these promotions, and then every now and then in every one of these work environments, I'd run up against someone who would give me a hard time. And for me, it was always a new boss or someone in a higher rank than me that for whatever reason felt I wasn't, quote-unquote, ready for my next promotion. I'd never forget, I was working for a company that no longer exists. It was the Warner Brothers Studio Stores. We used to sell stuffed animals and mugs, and I wanted so desperately to be a district manager. I wanted to be in charge of stores on the East Coast. And there was this one position that had opened up, and for the 4 or 5 years that I had been working for Warner Brothers, I had gone from store to store. I'd been promoted. I'd been put in stores to fix. I'd really demonstrated the ability to do well according to the standards or according to the way it was evaluated, the job was evaluated. And so when it came time for this district manager position, I thought, well, who's going to get it but me? I'm light, I've been promoted, I'm successful in my role, I have a new boss that just started supervising me, and there's this open position, and surely she would recommend me. Surely she would say, Craig, this is for you. Her name was Susan. And Susan didn't feel that way. Susan thought that I still had more to learn in my position. Now, certainly Susan was wrong, because in my mind, I had done everything perfect. I wanted it so bad, and so now Susan became a symbol of hate. I was sure she hated me. I was sure that it was her that was trying to keep me from succeeding. She stood between my happiness and my new position. And in truth, that symbol and what I thought about her really did stand between my happiness. In fact, what I would come to learn from the teachings of A Course in Miracles is that Susan was actually my savior. If I was willing to give it the opportunity, if I was willing to listen to Spirit and follow Spirit guidance, if I was willing to use it as an opportunity for forgiveness, Susan could be a symbol for my salvation. But no, I was, for whatever reason, naive, whatever reason, unaware in that moment, and I ended up quitting my job and moving on to another company, which I ended up hating and quit after 2 weeks, and then found another job. And this cycle continued for years. I'd go into another position, it wouldn't be Susan, it would be a David. Go into another position, it would be a Tracy. Go into another company, it would be a Scott. And so I kept bumping up to people. And so since doing the work, or since recognizing that at the end of the day, my happiness is within me, my happiness is solely within me, and it is the will of God that I come to recognize the truth of who I am, I have learned that it is impossible for any symbol outside of me to take away what I am by God's declaration. I am worthy, I'm whole, I'm complete. So nothing outside of me can take anything away. So here I am, knowing this, I run into a colleague or someone who comes into my company who I perceive as competing with me. Her name was Mary. And the irony is that here's Mary now, here, after looking back at my career and years of this experience, and that one person always seeming to show up, now having the awareness and recognizing that this person, Mary, is basically just another Susan, and in another form, and here's my opportunity. Now I know, okay, so she can be my savior. So how am I going to go about this? Well, the course would teach me forgiveness. Part 2 of the workbook, page 401, what is forgiveness? Forgiveness recognizes that you thought your brother did to you has not occurred. So this idea that Susan did anything to me, this idea that this new person, Mary, who just came into the office, is out to compete with me, this idea that, there's someone intentionally blocking the light from me, not true. Forgiveness then recognizes that what I thought my brother did to me did not occur. It does not pardon sins and make them real. So it's not about saying to myself, I forgive Susan. Susan never did anything. So with this person, Mary, who just joins my office, she hasn't done anything. The idea that she's out to compete with me is coming from my head. The same head and the same voice that would make work my means to happiness. It is the ego's worldly thinking that would have me think that there are people in my work that are out to do something or hold me back from anything. So to forgive is to see where there was no sin. I am okay, I'm whole and complete. And in that view, are all your sins forgiven? So when I forgive Susan, when I forgive Mary, when I forgive these people at work, what I come to realize, I forgive myself for the way perhaps I treated others in the work environment. So where I thought of Susan as out for me or hating me, the truth is, if I was really honest, is perhaps I had feelings of hate for others. The competitiveness that I see in my colleague, or I saw in my colleague Mary, was but my competitiveness within me. So when I can come to recognize or overlook and forgive my brother, I am forgiving myself. I am releasing the guilt that I hold, the unconscious guilt that I hold for perhaps hating others in my work environment, judging others in work environment, competing with others in my work environment, judging others and their performance in the work environment. As I let that go, I begin to forgive others around me, I let that go that's within me, that unconscious guilt within me. There is no competition. Duh! I apparently did not know that or come into that realization until Mary showed up as a symbol to remind me of the stuff that I need to forgive. Thank you, Mary. I am so appreciative of you, and I love you dearly. And so the beauty that came out of this is one day, Mary and I were in a meeting, and we were throwing punches at each other. Not real punches, but verbal punches that probably only her and I, maybe a couple other people in the room knew about. But it was certainly uncomfortable. And that, I recognized immediately, didn't feel good. And so I withdrew from this idea of having to compete in a meeting. And so right afterwards, we had a meeting, and her and I, we pulled each other into an office, and we basically opened up. And I said to her, I'm sorry. Let me tell you how I feel and what I'm thinking. And it was an opportunity for me to bring up to the light everything that I was feeling, which was this sense of insecurity, this sense of not knowing what my future career would be. And she got to do the same thing. And in the same meeting, she said, well, I'm new in this office, and I'm afraid. And it was such a beautiful conversation. Everything was brought up into the light. from that became the most wonderful working relationship I've ever had with anybody, ever. And to this day, we are very good coworkers and friends at work, and certainly don't work as closely as we used to because we've split departments. But she remains, for me, a symbol of a turning point in my quote-unquote career as I look back. So any problem that is related to work, any thoughts about work as being a place of suffering or cause of suffering is related to our thoughts about work and our belief in work as a means for happiness. As I did as a teenager, thinking I needed to separate soda bottles from beer bottles to be happy to have that car, to get those clothes, to be popular. Later on in years, I was just doing a more quote-unquote adult version of that same scenario. Then, of course, the other thing that comes up in regards to work a lot is people ask the question, what's my purpose? What am I going to do in the world? You know, for me, I mentioned that I had been in a few jobs, in a relatively short amount of time. I think within a span of 10 to 15 years, I must have had 5 or 6 jobs, 7 jobs, which, by the way, I do not regret because as I sit here, I recognize that they've all been wonderful unlearning opportunities and opportunities to forgive. And certainly I couldn't, I'm able to now look back and use these things to awaken deeper parts of myself, of understanding and unlearning. So, and I know I'm guided by Spirit, and this journey is always safe. And so I think back at these jobs, and I think back at the 15 years where I've had all these jobs, and there were certainly moments where I got caught up in what I need to do and what I need to be. You know, even as a child, I remember my parents and a lot of adults would ask, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to do when you grow up? And so there's this lot of emphasis as a child from the adults to ask this question, what do you want to do? What do you want to be? And so ever since I can remember, there was always these thoughts of, I got to be something like that. Like I got to do that. I got to make a decision now. And I'll never forget my dad's wife at the time, because my mom and dad split up, was talking to me, and she was giving me like what would be considered a pep talk. And she was telling me about how it was so important that I figure out what I want to do as an adult, because if I didn't do something that made a lot of money, I was going to be in trouble. And I remember leaving that conversation thinking, oh my God, I don't want to be in trouble, and I don't want to be poor, and I certainly want to be successful. I want to be happy. And so she started to list all these careers that I can do that. And of course, she would say, you can be a lawyer, you can be a doctor, you can be all these things. And so I leave this conversation thinking, that's what I need to be. I'm not too excited about those things, but apparently that's what I need to be if I want to be happy. Now, that was something that I took with me into my college years. I couldn't figure out what I wanted to major in. It was always these choices of, I like that, but I can't make money at that, so I got to do this. I tried this, but this isn't working because I don't actually like this, but maybe I can do this. And even in my profession or my career, I landed in retail for most of my career. I didn't seek it out. It kind of landed on my lap in many ways, along with a lot of other jobs. But anyways, I've always carried this thought of, what do I need to be and what do I need to do? And I've never felt up into now, I've never felt like I found what it is that I need to do or what I enjoy doing. And the truth is because I've been misled about what that is or what is it that I need to do. I was misled to believe that what it is that I need to do or my purpose is going to be fulfilled in the world. Meaning if I became a doctor, meaning if I became something important, if I became something that paid money. What I am now learning is that my purpose has already been established, and if I'm willing to listen to the Spirit, my voice, to follow my vocation, that which inspires me will take on whatever form it's going to take in the world, and it doesn't really matter, because the end is happiness and joy, provided I recognize that I am employed by God. I am here to do His work. That is the only purpose that anyone could have. Yeah, Yes, I can have a job. Yes, I can make money. Yes, I can do a lot of things. But let me not be confused, or let me not forget, in truth, at the deepest level, there is only one purpose. And that is here to be a minister of God. Lesson 154 states, I am among the ministers of God. Period. Done. Complete. No confusion. I'm a minister of God. What's my purpose? I'm a minister of God. The lesson reads, let us today be neither arrogant nor falsely humble. It is arrogant to think that I could look at a college catalog and figure out what it is that I'm supposed to do. It is arrogant to think that what's going to make me happy is the promotion at work, this particular job. We have gone beyond such foolishness. We cannot judge ourselves, nor need we do so. But these are but attempts to hold decision off and to delay commitment to our function. Our function is joy. Our function is peace. When I'm in a meeting thinking about what I have to say, when I'm in a meeting judging others, when I'm in a meeting thinking I need to prepare to do well or to do good, then these are just attempts to hold off decision from doing what I'm here to do, which is to be a minister of God, to be a minister of love, to be a vehicle, a vessel in which the voice for God is speaking through me in everything that happens around me and everything that I do, whatever form it takes, whether I'm collecting cans on the street or separating bottles or in an executive meeting with my boss traveling on the West Coast. It does not matter. My function has not changed one bit. It is not our part to judge our worth, nor can we know what role is best for us. What we can do within a larger plan, we cannot see in its entirety. So God has a better and bigger plan. God knows what's best. So for me to say that what's best is that I do this job or that job, or this promotion or that promotion, if I think that I know what's best for me in the world of form, in the world of careers, in the world of work, then I have a surprise coming. And the surprise coming is that I will not find happiness in whatever it is that I think I'm supposed to do. You know, it's funny. I was in my role about 2 or 3 years ago, and my boss at the time came to me and said, you know what, Craig? We have this new position we want you to take on. It has never been done before. It would be brand new, and you would be the first to do it. Now, mind you, at that time, I was very clear on the position I wanted. I wanted to be a general manager of a department store. Like, that's what I wanted to do. That was my career path. That was my succession planning. I wanted to run a department store. That was on my mind. That is what I wanted. That is what I envisioned. Here was my boss coming in to say, I want to derail that for you. I have another assignment which I think that you're better cast for, and I believe you would do a good job in. And in my mind, I felt this huge disappointment because I thought, I'm afraid I don't want to do that. I want the general manager job, which has already been defined. I know that role, and that's the one I'm going after. But as the course would teach, I cannot see the plan in its entirety. So I knew my role in that moment was to follow Spirit. And what Spirit was telling me was, Craig, you can shoot for a position that's defined, this general manager position that's existed within the company since the company's existence. You can do this job, this general manager job, which there's many general managers in the company, many department stores. Or, listen, it's a new job. You'd be the first to create it. You would be the first to step into it. And then I thought, wait, I'm afraid of that. Because what if I don't do a good job? How can I not do a good job if my role is to be a minister of God and that is what I do? My success is ensured. So I went back to that office and I told my boss, you know what? I want to do this. I want to take this on. Give me this job where I get complete flexibility and creativity. I get to use this job as a vehicle to be a minister of God. And so I took that position on. Long story short, within a year I was promoted into another position, which I had no clue I'd even wanted, and I got it. And it turned out that position actually put me in a place where I was with bigger exposure, bigger ability to influence more people and interact with more people and give me a greater reach to do what I love doing best, which is be a minister of God. And to think back at the time when this first started, that I even had a clue that I would know what's right or wrong for me is just silly. I don't know what's best for me. I could have never predicted this position that I'm in today. The Voice for God knows our plan. It knows future, past. It knows everything. So it knows our part. Our part is cast in heaven, not in hell. Whatever that part is, it is in heaven, not in hell. That is guaranteed. And what we think is weakness can be a strength. So when I had thoughts about, I don't know if I can do this, I've never done this role before, that could be strength, because here I am coming into a new position with new, fresh eyes, a new way to look at it. I can also bring a sense of the joy and the love to this position. I remember when I was contemplating being a quote-unquote public student and teacher of A Course in Miracles, which in a deeper sense, I'm certainly a student of A Course in Miracles, and I get the joy of demonstrating and teaching as well. But when I contemplated this idea of being a student and teacher publicly with A Course in Miracles, I remember a lot of doubts coming to mind. The doubt that I'm 40-ish years old. I mean, there's already people doing this out there. What do I have to offer? I'm not a good writer, so why am I going to start a blog? And so there was all these weaknesses. I was also thinking about this from a work mentality, a lot of ego thinking and thoughts about this that I'm doing. What the Course is saying is what we think is weakness can be a strength. And I would eventually come into that and recognize, Craig, yeah, you're not a writer, but boy, you can write in such a way that's raw and new and different. And maybe, just maybe, you and your joy as you're doing that, someone else may actually like the way you write. I've never been to writing school. I've never been a writer. In fact, I probably have the worst grammar, and God knows what would I do without spell check. I'm not a great writer, but there's joy in that. The joy comes from not having to worry about making a mistake. Who cares? I'm 40-ish years old. To start something like this, really, now? I thought that was a weakness. Duh, what a strength. Because there's other 40-year-olds dealing with the same crap that I'm dealing with. Geez, what better way to bring us together? That is a total strength. So sometimes we think our weaknesses, we have weaknesses, and so we think for whatever reason we can't, follow our intuitive guidance or follow our inspiration because we tell ourselves, we can't. And what the Course is saying is everything that you're saying you can't, it could actually be a strength, It could be, if you looked at it differently, you may actually surprise yourself with a miracle. And by the way, what we believe is our strength is often arrogance. The second paragraph. Whatever your appointed role may be, it was selected by the Voice for God, whose function is to speak for you as well. The role has already been appointed. Our role of minister of God is done. It's a done deal. You got the job. You're hired. And the reward is eternal peace. That's your paycheck. One paycheck. Eternal peace. Done. Sign me up. Seeing your strengths exactly as they are, and equally aware of where they can be best applied for what, to whom, and when, He chooses and accepts your part for you. Your spirit within has already selected its part. Your spirit wants to be unleashed. Our spirit is here to be unleashed. He does not work without your own consent. There's no doubt this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Being a minister of love. I have already consented to this. It's agreed. It's done. I've signed the contract. It's done. But He is not deceived in what you are and listens only to His voice in you. He's not playing the game that you can't. Can't is not an option. It is through His ability to hear one voice, which is His own, that you become aware at last that there is one voice in you. It's you. It's you longing for love. It's you wanting to express love. It's you that wants to expose love that is there. And that
One voice appoints your function and relays it to you, giving you the strength to understand it, do what it entails, and to succeed in everything you do that is related to it. God has joined His Son in this, and thus His Son becomes His messenger of unity with Him. As I allow myself to follow spiritual guidance, as I allow myself to hear the Holy Spirit within me and guide me, I become a vehicle of joy. I get to do what I enjoy most. And I'm the one that stands to benefit alongside those others around me. And those who need to be around me in my work are assigned. They're set. God will use me. Place me where I need to be. Time, date, place has already been established. I was meant to separate bottles for whatever reason when I was in high school. I was meant to be in retail, hopping around the jobs the way I did. That was all meant to be exactly how it was supposed to be, because I am where I need to be as assigned by God. I just need to remember that there's only one purpose, one function, which is to be among the ministers of God. Minister of love in every moment, every situation. Never to look at the situation as work. Never to look with the thought stream of ego. It is this joining through the voice for God of Father and of Son that sets apart salvation from the world. So when we recognize this unity, this joining with the voice for God, we recognize this unity. That's salvation from the world. That's salvation. It's different from the world's definition of salvation, which would be you got to get a good job that pays you a certain amount of money. As we learn, I am sustained by the love of God. So if I'm joined with God, working for God, my vocation is God, then my salvation is guaranteed. It is this voice which speaks of laws the world does not obey, which promises salvation from all sin. The world would tell you differently. The world does not obey these laws. Now this mind becomes aware again of who created it and His lasting union with itself. So it is self, the one reality in which its will and that of God are joined. So basically, if we are following Spirit, if we are following our vocation or in line with our vocation, we will experience the joy that is intended for us. We would recognize who we truly are joined with. Our salvation is going to come from that recognition of that which who we come to see or learn ourselves to be, which is whole, complete, and enlightened. By following that, we are freed from the laws of the world, which, as we know, are 180 degrees from that which is the world of God, the love of God. As we do our work of God, or as we do the work of God, or as we are among the ministers of God, we basically are learning who we are. So work takes on a completely different perspective. It takes on a completely different costume. Work now, for me, becomes my salvation, provided I recognize that my only purpose and my only work is to be a minister of God. It does not matter what I'm doing at work. It doesn't matter if I'm in a meeting. It doesn't matter if I'm stuffing envelopes. It doesn't matter if I'm typing on the computer. It doesn't matter if I'm engaging with my boss. It does not, the form does not matter. What matters is I recognize that I'm following inspiration. I'm doing what I'm being called to do from within. Nothing outside of me, nothing outside of me is truly going to bring me the happiness and joy that I seek. There is no such thing as work when you are following guidance. So going back to some of the problems or the issues that come up for people when they think about work, issues like, I don't like what I do. Well, that's because you don't know what you're supposed to be doing. If you knew what you were supposed to be doing, or you recognize the opportunity to do what you were coming here to do, you wouldn't care what it is that you were doing. I don't like the people. Well, you don't like the people because basically these people represent your unconscious guilt that you're projecting onto them. And again, you're not remembering your function to forgive, to be holy, to remember the love of God. Of course you don't like the people because you don't like yourself. What do I do? What am I supposed to be in this world? You are already everything you're supposed to be. You need do nothing but follow Spirit's guidance. So vocation and work means two completely different things. And when we look at it from that perspective, we can use the issues from work to help us come into a greater perspective or a more enlightened viewpoint of really what it means to have a job, to work in this world. My work doesn't bring me happiness. My work could never be, or my happiness could never be a result of the work. But work can be a result of my happiness. And that is my vocation.